Thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Secure Connections podcast, Recurring Revenue Opportunities in Security for MSPs. This series is brought to you by IOTSA, the Internet of Things Security Services Association. And I'm your host, Brian Sherman. And joining me today is Rob Ray, who is Vice President of Business Development for datto, a 100% channel-focused organization that protects essential business data for tens of thousands of the world's fastest-growing companies. Rob has more than 25 years of experience in IT services sales and other B2B activities. All his work was with 100% channel-focused organizations, directly helping VARs, solution providers, and MSPs achieve their wildest business goals. As Vice President of Business Development at datto, Rob's role is to oversee many different aspects of the company's programs, including its community, events, marketing development funds, vendor management, and the Partner Advisory Council. He also plays an instrumental role in datto's go-to-market strategy. Prior to datto, Rob built successful sales and channel teams for Level Platforms, which was acquired later by AVG, and Compact, which was acquired by HP. He has received numerous awards and recognitions in the channel, including being named a CRN Channel Chief every year since joining the company. He's also been included in many industry lists as a top executive and influencer. He serves as chair of CompTIA's Vendor Advisory Council and is a member of the Exchange Vendor Advisory Board. With all of that, let me welcome Rob Ray to the Secure Connections podcast. Good day, sir.
Yeah, good day, Brian. How are you?
I am good. I'm winded after introducing that, though.
I was going to say that was pretty long.
You've done a lot, which is great.
Doesn't feel that way, but I guess when you put it in that context, it definitely is a lot, isn't it?
It is, but I've known you for a number of years, and it's worthy of all those accolades, and I'm sure we left a few things off.
I appreciate that.
But Rob, I'd like to start off each podcast getting to know our guest a little more. And in this case, I don't think I ever asked why or how you got into IT. What motivated you to get into a tech career?
It's kind of a story. I'm a little bit embarrassed about it. I was in finance, believe it or not. I actually went to school and wanted to become an accountant. And anybody that knows me knows that that is probably the last career choice that anybody would think for me. But I was a big math fan. I love spreadsheets. You know, numbers are just clean and pure, and was really into that. And then spent the first 12 years of my career in finance working for a bank up in Canada doing lending and investment portfolios and stuff like that. And I realized I was never going to make any money. You know, you'd get your simple little raise every single year. So a guy that worked for me, this guy that was absolutely brilliant, he's gone on to work for like Facebook and Apple and everything like that all over the world. But he actually left. He worked for the bank for a very short period of time, ended up taking a job over at Compact Computers in January, or it would have been like November 1999. And we got along really well. And he calls me up and says, look, they're looking for a manager. They want to hire somebody outside of IT because they've churned through a bunch of IT guys. They wanted to hire somebody that had management experience more so than IT experience. Would you be interested? And I said, oh, come on, it's IT. I'm not interested. At which point he shared with me that he was making double the amount of money that I was. So I'm like, all right, definitely worth a look. So I go in for an interview and they actually did hire me, ended up hiring me to take on a sales management position over at Compact Computers. First day of work was January 1st, 2000. Now, for those of you that have been in the IT industry or aware of what was going on January 1st, 2000, that was right after Y2K. So the absolute worst job in IT would have been with a hardware company right after Y2K because everybody had just refreshed their entire fleet thinking that everything was going to blow up on 1/1/2000, right? So I inherited a funnel of zero. I inherited a team that was sitting there that was hungry, that had no funnel to work from, and basically had to grind it out for the next 3-4 years to try to find some deals and beg, borrowed, and stole to get every desktop, laptop, server deal we possibly could. But it worked out really well. And then, of course, got acquired by HP. But that's in essence, it was purely because of greed. And I haven't looked back. I've been in the IT industry for most of my career since and have absolutely loved it.
Awesome. Great way to start, too. I know, and I'm sure you know, plenty of people who have come from the accounting space into IT. It seems like it must be a natural fit. I don't know if it's the numbers or the patience or whatever it may be, but I know several that have made that switch over the years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So great. Well, now that we know a little more about Rob, let's talk cybersecurity, IoT, and the channel. I'll kick it off with, you got involved in managed services and recurring revenue model really early on and took an active role in its progression over the past decade and a half, if not longer. I know that's as long as I've known you. But with cloud and other factors negatively affecting margins, what should MSPs be doing to increase their customer value?
Well, I mean, obviously, and we talk about like eroding margins. We talk about where the next opportunities. You talk about how to expand your managed services offering, and there's lots of different avenues and opportunities to do that. I would suggest that these days the opportunity is better for the channel than it ever has been before, especially for the managed services provider. The amount of outsourcing that's going on in the SMB marketplace, specifically in the North American market, and even starting to see massive growth within the European market, is becoming more and more. And it kind of got triggered before, like when you're selling products, desktops, notebooks, servers, those things, you kind of could, like an end user could hire somebody, that could manage the stuff, in-house IT team, their wife's cousin, because he's got some IT background and he can manage this stuff. And, the risk was relatively low. And then we start heading into the cloud, and all these newer technologies, more affordable ones are coming out, and Microsoft and Amazon, and everybody's pushing all these new technologies. And then the Internet of Things starts popping up, and it starts getting even a little more complicated there. So now, your wife's cousin that runs IT for you is all of a sudden not equipped to handle all the new stuff that's kind of been piling on. And then you add security to that, and all the risks, and now regulations and penalties and fines, and what's going on in Europe with GDPR, what's going on in Canada with ransomware registrations. Like, now all of a sudden it becomes way too complicated to have in-house IT. So from a MSP perspective, and this is where our organization has had immense successes by focusing exclusively on building the MSP and building that model, and having and finally pushing that outsource model. That, like, the opportunity for the MSPs around recurring revenue, around everything that we just talked about, is immense. And there's a lot of very, very large organizations with a lot of billions and billions of dollars being bet that this is going to continue. It's going to continue to grow, that we're going to see shrinkage in a reseller type model, and massive growth in the outsourced managed services model, specifically within the SMB marketplace. And that's going to happen worldwide.
Do you find, and I think from time to time you see where MSPs are so active and building their own model that they kind of not looking at the next level as far as like there's margin, in the mystery, is realizing what are their customers struggling with and moving into new things like, advanced cybersecurity and IoT, and, what's next is how do they keep their eye on that while continuing to build their existing business?
I think the key to it, and this is where every vendor is investing their money, is education. By getting the MSP to stay on top of everything that is scary that's going on in the world, that is making their end users feel more comfortable with what's going on, and just a basic understanding, or just that simple, hey, everything is fine. You don't need to worry about this kind of message. I'll give you actually perfect example of this. We have a phenomenal partner of ours out of Adelaide, Australia. Great city out in Australia. We moved into the Australian market probably about 2 years ago. He was the first one that adopted our technology because he started looking at it from a security perspective more so than like a resell or a managed services product, and really started focusing in on the ransomware epidemic that was happening and continues to happen. It's been a massive win for the channel. So what he does is he kind of positions himself as a ransomware expert within Adelaide. He starts offering alternatives to never pay the ransom, and here's how. Comes up with a security offering within his managed services stack. That security service actually literally grows faster and bigger than his managed services stack, to the point where they're now out there hiring people, acquiring other MSPs, just really rapidly growing their business. And what happens is their company is now the local expert. So anytime there's a big ransomware attack, or anytime somebody in that Adelaide market needs cybersecurity, whether it's the news, whether it's a TV, whether it's a print, something along those lines, they're the first company they call. So they call this company up, this MSP, and this MSP's got the knowledge and experience and kind of the wherewithal to be able to talk about all the threats and the threat landscape that's out there, but with this, hey, but you don't need to worry about it because we got this covered. And you have to be able to invest in certain technologies, which are not expensive, catered for the SMB market, and here's the way it looks. And for him and his organization, it's been an absolutely massive win. And I'll tell you, something like WannaCry hits, and I remember this specifically, the whole world is in panic because every newspaper, every television station, every radio station, WannaCry is the hot topic, right? It's this big, crazy cybersecurity attack that's actually happening. Well, what he did was he actually turned around to his customer base and said, hey, this is what you're paying me for. When you guys get that phone call or read that article or listen to that news story that says WannaCry is crazy, really bad, you don't have to worry about it. You're safe. You're covered because that's what you're paying me for. And that peace of mind and that ability to go, and that's in essence, that's kind of the core of what these SMB end users are looking for, is that peace of mind. They're paying you for that peace of mind. And, for them to be able to sit there and listen to the panic that's going on around them and go, I don't have to worry about this because John's got it. That's what it's all about.
Certainly. That's a great example too. And, cybersecurity is the topic of the day in the channel. You're hearing a lot of discussion about it, as well as in the news and with customers. But what other managed services trends have you seen that indicate there is indeed a path to move from, an MSP to an MSSP, whatever they may want to call themselves?
I don't want to say MSSP isn't a thing, because it totally is a thing.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any reason why an MSP needs to rebrand themselves as an MSSP. There is no reason that an MSP can't do typical managed services offering, but add a security stack or a security offering, a branch to it, because I think that there's room for both. And if you remember, actually, Brian, when we take a look back and talk about cloud solution providers, guys that were born in the cloud, I still struggle to find anybody that's making a decent amount of money in doing that. And there are a few, but you really have to have a real broad landscape and be very, very specialized in a particular product and really integrated with that product. So, that space is small in comparison to the MSP space, which is more of a general knowledge kind of thing. Right. But I don't think there's anything wrong with being a security expert within that space. So if you're looking at that, take a look at the technologies that you got. What would fall under a security stack? And for me and for us and for our partners, it's just about positioning it properly. You have the knowledge, you have the tools. There are certain technologies that you can use that can help you open the door even further. There are certain things that you can leverage to get more into the dark web type stuff, which wouldn't be a massive leap for any MSP from that matter. But if you take a look at your stack, and a perfect example is this, if you look at backup. Backup has always been considered a storage technology. When you take a look at the Gartner quadrant, it's classified as storage. Well, just in the last 2 years, that's changed, where now backup is considered in the security stack. And that is purely because security is more of a thing. There's more risk involved. People are willing to pay higher margins for it. And therefore, when you position something as like, I don't want to say archaic, but it's been around for a long time. When you position something like backup in the security stack, all of a sudden it's new, it's fresh, it's innovative, it's awesome, and it's going to save you at the end of the day versus the traditional, you lose something, we restore something kind of idea. So, just look at and a lot of it's got to do with just the spin, but a lot of it's also got to do with what the needs are and the threat landscape that's out there.
It's actually you mentioned it too, it's part of the strategy, I think, moving forward for those that are MSPs and cybersecurity experts is, they may not be used to mentioning backup and business continuity in their security discussions, but what's the best practice that you're seeing for them to start adopting that and making it a core part of their security offering?
Well, there's money to be had there. So I think that you've got to take the time to learn a little bit more about it. And again, it could just be as simple as positioning. And there's a ton of opportunities out there to learn about security. IOTA definitely is one of those things, but you can find generally a lot of localized shows that are coming out that are focusing around MSPs positioning security. There's a lot of education that's out there. You take a look at a lot of the even the traditional channel websites are to have some aspect of sales and marketing around security. And it basically is just repositioning the stack. It's just kind of taking certain pieces, putting it together, painting it into a box and saying, this is how I'm going to keep your place secure. This is how I'm going to keep your place safe. And, I'll give you a perfect example. Like, we tend to focus around ransomware, which is kind of where our biggest win is when it comes to the security stack. Is you don't have to pay ransom. Literally, if you have one of our devices out there, we eliminate the downtime. We eliminate the need to pay the ransom. We give you the ability to recover the data back to a certain point of time without impacting everybody in the environment. That's the value out of what our technology does. Is it backup and recovery? Damn right it is. But guess what? When I position it as a ransomware protection, now all of a sudden it's worth more money, therefore more margin, therefore more value add to the actual MSP. Antivirus, spam, anti-malware, testing, training, all those types of things can be bundled into an actual solution. And there's a ton of education that's out there to help you kind of figure out what does this actually look like. And guaranteed, you probably have 90% of these products in your stack already. All you got to do is just find a new way to position it, some new catchphrases to use, and all of a sudden you've got something new that is of more value to and more understanding, for that matter, from the SMB perspective than what managed services is.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. The when you look at it, positioning it too, I mean, the discussion is proactive security for a cybersecurity expert, and if it's in there too, is as far as making sure that your backups are set up, everything is properly configured, and then on the back end, it can be mentioned in with remediation services as well. And by the way, once we figure out what the problem is, then we can get you back up and running. So it's part of that entire discussion, not just proactive and what you're doing every day, but also if there is a problem, we've got you covered kind of discussion.
Do you know the old, you're a Seinfeld fan at all?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember the Seinfeld episode where he goes and rents a car, shows up at the airport and they have the reservation, but they don't have the car?
Yes.
Okay. So he's talking to the lady there and he's saying, you know what, take the reservations easy. Anybody can take a reservation, but it's actually holding the reservation. That's the important part of this whole process.
Yeah.
Right. And that is kind of the way we're positioning it. And, when you look at backup technology, anybody can take a backup. Backup's easy. Backup's super easy. And you can just assume the backups are happening. It's the recovery that's the important part of all this. And can you recover? And when you're talking about security, it has to go well beyond backups are being taken, everything is fine. It has to come through testing. It has to come through, like, literally take my environment down, restore it, show me that this is possible, and doing that on a regular basis. It has to say, if I want to delete this file and be able to recover this file, and how quickly can I recover it? It's about eliminating downtime that comes along with all these types of different things. There's a hell of a lot more to it than just taking a backup. And that's where the new positioning model actually comes in. That's where the partners are now winning. That's where you're actually, instead of hearing objections like you're too expensive, now they're saying, wow, I totally see the value in everything that you're positioning to me and why I have to pay more as a result. And that's where that kind of all starts.
Sounds perfect. Now, shifting gears a little bit, we're talking about information, and the value of the Internet of Things is also derived from the data. It's not the sensors, it's not the devices, it's the data that they collect and how they leverage it. And it's that mystery we were talking about earlier. It's complicated, especially for some of the SMB and mid-sized companies that are going to be getting into the Internet of Things. That makes it seem like BDR solutions would be the perfect complement to me, ensuring the client's information is protected and available when needed. Are those conversations happening? I mean, are there tools that are being developed by Datto and others to help providers kind of position themselves as IoT experts as that ramps up?
It is, yes. I think that we have a fundamental issue with the Internet of Things as positioning, because I think everybody has heard it, but the education is not there.
True.
I think that the average end user has probably heard the term Internet of Things, but is thinking more along the lines of their refrigerators, ordering groceries for them, as opposed to how that interacts with their businesses or how that interacts with their day and kind of the importance around that. And, for years and years and years, we've been telling stories about where the opportunity to proactively monitor, proactively manage a particular endpoint up, down, the data that's being produced out of this from a backup perspective. Where are you going to store that data? How long are you going to store it for? Do you need to store it? If you really need the order history for your milk, probably not. But if it's something that's related to your business, how can technology help kind of keep that, store that? And I think there's still some work that needs to be done there, both from the education level as from an end user perspective, the opportunity for the channel. And I think that's got to be driven from us vendors, where we're sitting there going, look, here is a need. Here is an opportunity then something somebody is willing to pay money for, and therefore here's how we can actually position that. And I'll be absolutely honest, where I haven't had a ton of time invested in that, but it is definitely something that we're going to be talking about heading into 2018, because if there's money to be had there, then obviously we want to help our partners go and get that. So, data, what data is being produced, how long do you want to store it for, how safe does it need to be, is all going to be super, super important stuff. All conversations that MSPs can be having, and completely relevant when it comes to a managed services offering and what the MSP can do for it. So that's kind of another beautiful, good kind of light at the end of the tunnel for the MSPs, is that this is only going to get bigger. This is only going to get, more, I don't want to say expensive, but more lucrative, and bigger opportunity for the MSPs as time goes on. Because again, your wife's cousin's probably not going to have the ability to store that stuff safely, securely, recover it quick, virtualize it, trim it, whatever it is that you need, prune it, and whatever it is that you need in order to make sure that it's all good all the time.
Sure. I mean, there's a big difference between, IoT and manufacturing and ordering extra Tide using your Amazon button.
Yeah.
I know there's differences
Yep.
of what that'll have to be stored. So, no, and I think we're on the cusp too, especially in the channel. Is we're seeing more and more each day where there's use cases for IoT and new solutions being introduced, and I can see where the vendors are going to play a huge part in the education and the tools that are created to help providers make those connections with their customers. Very good. So advanced cybersecurity conversations tend to focus a lot on these, I won't say point sales, or they're more like quarterly or annual assessments and as needed remediation services. So as they move up the stack in security, they tend to move to those things that are more infrequent than the recurring services that we're used to talking about in the channel. What approach would you recommend MSPs take to ensure that they aren't missing out on the recurring revenue opportunities when they're switching those conversations?
So this is kind of the chicken and the egg thing, and it's actually going to start somewhere, and it's a very, very consultative type sale. And this is where you mentioned it, like monthly business meetings, quarterly business reviews, those kinds of things are going to be super, super important. Is literally taking that consultative role with the end user, talking about what it is that they're doing. Let me I'll give you a perfect example when we start looking at SaaS applications. Okay, so we're not fooling ourselves here at Datto. We're not saying that physical backup is going to be a thing 10 years from now. We know that it's not going to. So what are we doing about that? Is we're constantly evolving the business, and we're constantly evolving and moving the entire channel forward towards what is next. And we'll still have legacy products as we continue to see this, because everything is an evolution. Nothing ever gets ripped out, day one. And we saw that with cloud technology being introduced 12 years ago, and it hasn't. I mean, it's revolutionized the way we do business, but it really hasn't put a ton of people out of business. So what's next? And that's where we have the opportunity now to be that consultative, and I'm talking about the MSP, being that consultative salesperson, having those conversations. I may not have a solution for you today, but I'll keep my eyes open. I'll keep my ears open and see what actually happens. And then you start thinking about things, and what we've started investing in is, if you take a look at SaaS, and again, this is just kind of a flyer here. I don't know where it's going to go, but we have SaaS protection today for Google, for Office 365, the G Suite, everything that you could possibly want. So as you're selling this stuff, you can back it up, you can recover it faster. You don't have to go to Microsoft. It includes archiving. Ransomware gets delivered through SaaS applications, and we have this way of being able to restore without the ransomware problem. So those are all fine stories. But when you look at any organization that you're probably working with today as an MSP, and if I look at datto as a whole, we're using like 60 or 70 different SaaS applications alone. Right. And, 60 or 70 SaaS applications that are all producing data. Well, does that data need to be stored? Does that data need to be recovered? Does that data have some type of regulation around it, where we potentially have to keep it for a certain period of time? You know what? We've just started looking at that. So then when you look at the MSP as a whole, are we looking at the MSP to go, you're just a Microsoft reseller, therefore we're only going to offer you Microsoft services. You're a Google reseller, so we're going to offer you Google services. Or could you position yourself as a data protection company? Sure, maybe you don't sell Salesforce because Salesforce doesn't have a great channel program or a channel program at all, but could you store that data, recover that data, regardless of what that data actually is? And if all of these devices and all of these SaaS applications are producing data, why can't you just take care of that data as opposed to actually even owning the original application? You don't have to. So is there an opportunity for you to take SaaS application A that doesn't have a channel program, that they picked up off the shelves somewhere or off the online, but it's producing data that you can put in the cloud, you can recover faster, you can store it safely, you can follow certain regulations? Why couldn't that happen? Why couldn't the MSP be that person? So that's the kind of stuff that we're looking at when we think about what is next, what the future is, what does the channel even look like? And that's where we start getting excited and start thinking a little bit outside of the box of the traditional. I sell it, I service it, I warranty it, and I replace it.
So many of the emerging technologies and platforms are really about the information that they're gathering these days, not just IoT. I think it's a huge opportunity for MSPs to build their recurring revenue, but also even to build their consulting businesses up, which can be recurring revenue as well. But the opportunities are endless.
I'll actually give Dan Wensley credit for this. Can I give Dan Wensley credit for anything?
Certainly.
Okay, so I'll give Dan Wensley credit for this, because when I first joined the IT industry way back and I met Dan for the first time, I didn't quite understand what he was talking about, but you get it today. And the expression that he used was, he or she who owns the data will own the customer. And I think at the end of the day, that's probably the most important part of it, is that if you have that customer data, you are such an integral part of their business that it would be very, very difficult for them to walk away from you, rip your services out, even if they're dissatisfied. If you own the data, you own the customer. And I think that's probably been never more important than it is today.
True.
Sorry, Brian, I interrupted you.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think it's having it, securing it, and leveraging it is going to be the key in the future. How can they use it to the maximum effect? And that's where I think a lot of channel companies are starting to differentiate themselves, and they need to. That's where the margin comes from in the future. We'll be doing those type of services. So, Rob, we've covered a lot today, and I know we'll have you back hopefully for another podcast before too long. But do you have any final thoughts before we close? I know we covered a lot of territory.
We did. And if you haven't noticed, I'm a little bit passionate about the managed services piece of all of this, because, I actually invested quite a bit of my own career and years ago made a serious bet when I got out of the hardware game, but wanted to stay in IT. I made a pretty significant bet on managed services, and it's made me wildly successful in my career. And the opportunity is only getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Because if you remember, Brian, 15 years ago, there wasn't many of us that were talking about managed services being the next big thing. And now it's not even a conversation. It is just a thing, and which is awesome. I'm just excited because, a lot of the people outside of our little community, the managed services community, are starting to pay attention. You have a lot of very, very large organizations, VC companies, private equity companies that are looking at this market and saying this is a massive opportunity. And I don't know if you know this, Brian, but I'll share this with you because we just pulled this data out. But back in December, we formally announced that Datto and Autotask had merged. Okay. And one of the things as we continue to dig in and try to figure out how all this is going to look for Autotask and Datto partners, one of the things that we discovered is that last year, okay, in 2017, Autotask users, which are all MSPs, pushed over $7 billion worth of IT sales and services through Autotask. Wow. Now, Autotask is not the only PSA that's out there. As a matter of fact, it's not even the largest PSA that's out there. So if you actually take a look at all the PSAs that are out there, all the MSPs that are using other PSAs, you can only imagine how much money is flowing through those PSAs, which is exclusively going through MSPs. Now, if we just look, bear with me on this, but if we just look at the Autotask users and that $7 billion, if that was a company, an entity, if the channel that's using Autotask was an entity, that would be just under the top 100 on the Fortune 500 list. That company would be bigger than JetBlue, literally. How awesome is that? Just to think that the managed services community using Autotask in the United States and Europe is bigger than JetBlue. Like, that is a phenomenal thing, and that is only growing. And that is where all of a sudden the channel's starting to get more and more recognition. And I get crazy excited about what the next 5 years are going to look like as we continue to evolve, tell better stories, expect more from your vendors, start winning more business, and everybody starts growing overall. I'm excited about it.
There's a lot to be excited about, and that's part of the discussion in the channel. I think many MSPs think they're just a small piece of the pie, but collectively, and they're growing, they're strong. Many of them are double digits and continue to be very strong, but they still think they're a small player. But when you collectively look at it, the channel is a force to be reckoned with.
That's a massive force, and I think we got to stop apologizing about it.
I try to remind them to do that when I try to offer more encouragement than pessimism and change that around. But
yep, absolutely.
Well, great. Well, on behalf of IOTA, I'd like to thank you, Rob Ray from Datto, for joining us today. And for those who tuned in to listen to our discussion, I had a lot of fun and look forward to the next one. But I'd also like to encourage our listeners to take a few extra minutes to check out all the great cybersecurity content that's on the association's website. That's iotssa.com for those of you who haven't visited. Thanks again, and please have a fantastic and secure day.